when I was younger, my mother used to tell me that I was born with a piece of paper and a pencil in my hand. So I was literally writing stories, hundreds of thousands of stories, and I still have most of them here. The rest are in California. Um, and I've always just been writing. And the reasoning why 2020, it has nothing to do with COVID. Actually, my friends all wanted me to put, on my book, the card catalog that was published in 2020, they wanted me to write on it, written because of COVID. And I'm like, no, it had nothing to do with COVID. I wasn't stuck indoors doing this. I was still going to work and freaking doing work and writing. The reasoning why is because, I mean, honestly, this is kind of a weird story, but the only reason why I published my story finally was because I got the guts to finally say, I'm going to have someone look at this. So I wrote this short story called Release, and I let somebody read it, and they said this was one of the most amazing stories they've ever read, and I should publish it. So I did. I submitted it to a magazine. They loved it. They published it. But that was my first introduction to publishing. And I did not know that that was a vanity publishing. So I didn't get nothing out of it. So then at that point, I got my stories back after a year, which would have been the end of 2020, which would have been when this was published. I took my stories and I published them as a whole anthology, or what you would call, a collection of my own stories. And it really was just because this one gentleman read my story and wrote me this beautiful email that said this is one of the most amazing, heartbreaking reality stories I've ever read in my life. And when I read that, I cried. And I was like, nobody's ever said that to me to my face. So I just sent it to this magazine. I got it published, yay. But then I just kept going, and then I published it. And actually, one of the things he wrote is on the front of the cover, card catalog. And I wanted to write more of what he said, but one of the last things he wrote was very talented writer on it. And that's his quote that was in one of the emails. And that really stuck with me. And that's literally the only reason why I published something. After I published card catalog, I was like, this isn't that hard. So I took something I wrote when I was 16, which I called self-titled. And it's literally about, you go into a house, apartment that's empty, and you find a notebook underneath the bed, and you read it, and you find this kid's just misery. This ain't not angsty, because yes, it's angsty, okay, because it's a teenager, but it's something I wrote when I was 16, and I published that. And all it is just you find a notebook and you read it, and it got published, and that's what it's about. It's just about this one kid, people relate it to like Catcher in the Rye, but not really. To me, it's as if Catcher in the Rye and Tales of the City had a baby with like Nirvana, and you get self-titled. I don't know how to explain that. And I just kept going from there. That's when I wrote Devils in the Woman. And the only reason why I wrote that, because I wanted to get in touch with myself, not really myself, but my grandmother who passed away. And at the same time, I was trying to get in touch with my husband, who was a big Dead fan. So I was trying to connect all these dots within my own life and create a story of these little dots that I could not connect to myself. And then I just kept going. And I'm working on something now, which actually is in card catalog. There's a short story called Catch Us the Foxes, and I'm turning that into a full-blown novel. It is different than the short story, but just for it uses some of the same characters.
So is your first passion short stories as opposed to writing full-blown novels?
I don't really know. No, I'd rather have a full-length novel because that's what I've always read. I love that. But I write these really amazing scenes, and I just take those as short stories, and that's what I finish, and I leave them there. And then I'm like, oh, I'll just publish this. And then I threw it into the book. Really, I don't have a preference. It's whatever the story tells me. So I take on my characters, Craven, Reynard, the different characters. I'm trying to think, Charles, all the different ones. And I just let them tell me their story. And if the story's only 40 pages, that's what they get. Jujubee was first started off in like one of my little notebooks. Literally, I just sat there and went, what's a weird name? And I wrote Jujubee. And then I just kept going, okay, what's so weird about that name? And then that's when I connected this whole story of my grandmother, stories of my husband and the Grateful Dead. I started looking at like New Mexico and traveling and time travel and all this weird stuff. And it just came from her literally telling me, write my name down, write Jujubee. And I did in a notebook. And that was it. So